I wanted to start this off with little Sketchup drawings that I did. I was making this nightstand for my wife. Her name's Jess. I made these two pretty basic designs in Sketchup. One had two drawers, the other had a drawer and a larger door. She wanted the one with the door, so that's the one I went with. I started out here by gluing together three 1x3s to make a 3x3 leg for my feet. So they weren't the best pieces of wood, but it worked out, so I'm not too displeased. I could have gotten just a 3x3 like pre-cut piece, but it was just way more expensive than just these three boards were, so that's what I ended up going with. And I shouldn't have even bought these because I had bought 1x10s that I ripped down to 1x7s, so I have a whole bunch of little 3-inch pieces that I could have used, but it doesn't matter at the end of the day. Now, I didn't really have enough clamps. I should have cut this in half and only used half of it because that would have made it a lot easier to clamp, but it worked. It was glued enough together and there's no gap, so you can't even see the glue lines actually in the legs. So now I sanded it. I did end up having to shave off one of the sides because the one board in the middle was crowned a little bit, I guess. So there was just sanding. It was just taking forever, and I don't have a planer or anything. I guess you really shouldn't put end grain through a planer anyway. Well, I guess it's not end grain, but whatever. It just wouldn't have really worked. So I just used my circular saw to cut off the one edge, just a real thin piece. So I guess technically it's not really square anymore, but it was only like a millimeter that I shaved off. I guess probably less than the kerf of the blade actually. So here I needed to cut 4 feet off of this, so that's all I was doing here. I was just lining it up, marking it so they'd all be exactly the same. And it actually turned out to be pretty level. I didn't even use the little leveling feet I had originally intended on using. So because I don't have a jointer, I needed these 1x10s that I was ripping to 1x7s because I was going to glue the two edges together to make a 14-inch wide piece, which is what my width from front to back of the nightstand was going to be. It was 14 inches. So I have this little straight piece of aluminum it's what it's intended for, is to make a straight edge cut with a circular saw. So I was just getting that on relevant to where the blade was and where the cut was going to be. So a little bit of measurements here, I guess, of what the dimensions of the nightstand were going to be. Not that this is like a how-to or anything, it's just videoing me building it. The width from front to back was 14 inches. The length from side to side was 21, I believe. And then the height, not including the feet, the feet are 3 inches, so then just the height of the shell of the nightstand was 22 and a half. And I wanted it to be 23, but I made a little judgment call later on in the video where I end up re-mitering with my circular saw after they're glued together, and that took off a little bit more than I really wanted. So the overall height ended up being like 25 and a half inches, which is still fine because it's still just slightly higher than our mattress on our bed. So it still worked out at the end of the day, but it just wasn't really what I was aiming for. I was aiming for 26. So I believe I took the 2x6 off that I had in my saw very well. I just included a couple of I ripped away more than I needed two. I think I could get to the top and bottom out of one board, but I had to rip a bunch of 1x10s. It was like 6, I think, that I ripped. So now here I mitered all of them separately, which I shouldn't have even done. I should have just glued together the flat boards together. Shouldn't have bothered mitering them because I end up redoing it anyway with my circular saw after they're glued and sanded, so that it's one smooth edge the whole way across. Because I built the shell of this with mitered corners, which was a bit of a pain because I don't have the best setup in order to do that, and the way I even put them together is not a normal way that you just put them together, and I know that, but it's the only way that I could think of joining them together and keeping them together without having a gap, because it was such a long joint. It's just the best I could do, and I'll explain that when I get to that point. But for now, I'm just cutting them. I think I cut this one in half, but this was for one of the tops, the top or the bottom part. So then I mitered those, and I'm fitting a little bit here. And I have the shadow line light on my saw, so I'm just looking down because it actually still projects the 45 like miter on the side of the board, which is really nice. Unlike lasers, which really only will show it on the top, so you only get that top line, but this one will actually show the line on the edge of the board. Which that was just an upgrade kit that I had added to my saw, and if you're curious about it, I did make a video on that, so you could look in my past videos. I don't have very many, but I made a little video on it. So I got all of them as close as I could because I was going to glue the two together, so I wanted them to be as the same length as possible of their little partner board they were going to be glued together with. Now, I don't have a domino tool or anything like that, and I had originally tried to just measure really well and use dowels, like drill holes and use dowels in order to have dowels in the joint as well. But because the boards weren't perfectly square and perfectly flat, no matter how well I measured, they were never going to line up perfectly. And I don't have a planer, so there's just no way I could get the boards to be the exact same width at that joint. And I ended up just using glue, and the glue's strong enough. The glue's not going to fail or anything. It's for what this is, it's strong enough, and it's even literally a rectangular mitered box in the end, so that's even strong. It's strong enough. So I didn't even bother trying to figure anything else out. I just glued them together, clamped them, and moved on. Now, once they were all dry, I had to do this over a period of days because I only have like 4 clamps. So once they were all dry, it's been 24 hours about, I sanded them all down, get rid of all the excess glue, make the surfaces smooth enough that I didn't have to do a whole crap ton of finish sanding at the end. Because once it's all together, it's obviously hard to sand the inside and everything. So I just gave them a good sand. I think I went up to like 180 maybe. Now here's where I remitered literally every single edge, and I only shaved off, probably like a kerf size of the wood, so about the width of the blade. But it was just, they didn't line up very well at the end. And, the board a little bit of cupping. And it's just for what I was working with, like the best option. So really, I wanted to try to do this with boards like this, not like MDF or anything like that, or plywood, because I was really trying to see if it was possible to make a decent piece of furniture without using a jointer and a planer, because those are expensive tools. Not everyone is able to have them. I mean, I don't have them. And so I was just trying to see if it worked. And it worked. It didn't end up being perfectly square or perfectly, the joints aren't perfect, but it looks pretty good. And I mean, an experienced woodworker is going to look at it and notice it, and obviously they could do better. But I don't consider myself to be a professional by any means. I just enjoy doing this stuff. And for the fact that I did it myself in my basement with the tools I have is pretty impressive with how it turned out. So again, here I just glued these joints together. And then I know I have the video. Most of this is all just sped up because I had so much video of it, and it took me a long time, to be honest. And I'm also just it's not something I'm new with this whole recording stuff and editing things and putting it on YouTube. I'm just doing it for fun, really. So I do slow it down though when I get to the point where I put screws in these miter joints. And I only have this one clamp. I thought I had two, but I could only find the one, so I guess I only had the one. And so I have a drill bit that has a countersink bit on it as well. So that's what I was using. And I tried to stay as close to the inside edge of the miter joint that I could, because I wanted it to bite on as much wood as possible, because obviously a miter joint is a 45-degree angle, so if you countersink out that wood, you're not going to have a whole lot of wood that it's really pushing against. So but I wanted it to go, the screw head to go deep enough that I could put a little plug in to then cut off and sand down so that it wouldn't be able to see the screw head. And the whole reason I was doing that, even, which I would have had to do something anyway, because even if I was painting it originally, you would still see the screw head if I painted it. So I had to do something regardless of with plugging the hole. But we were originally going to stain the outside, and then I was going to paint the drawer, so it would have like a two-tone finish. But she ended up just wanting it all painted. So that was why I went through all this trouble in the first place, but it ended up looking really nice in the end anyway, and you can't even tell that those screws are there. So the way that I did it was on the top side, I have one screw up towards the corner and the other screw down towards the other corner. And then on the side faces, I moved them in, so there's two more towards the center. So there's 4 screws holding each joint together. They're just offset depending on where they are located on the cabinet. You can even tell from this angle that the wood is not perfectly square, but once I had to flex it a little bit to get it to go together, but once it was together, it was nice. It was literally like a solid box. Actually, you can see there too, I made a mistake on one of the holes. I came out through the inside of the cabinet, but it was on the inside, so I really didn't care. And again, it's also for my wife, so she's never going to notice that anyway. I guess I could have used wood filler on the holes, but I like my decision better. So here I think I had already drilled the holes for the feet, and I was just countersinking here with a little countersink bit. And I put two screws in each foot, and they're just diagonal so that the feet don't twist or anything. But I mean, look how it looks, for not having a planer or a jointer. It's a pretty square looking box. I mean, it's a rectangle. It's not a perfect square, but square in the sense of like 90-degree angles. Now here I had traced out each one and I marked them all, even though they were all pretty much the same size. I marked them 1, 2, 3, and 4 just so that I knew I was putting them in the place that I took them from. Glued them, clamped them, screwed them in. And like I said, each one has 2 screws, and you can see the holes. They're just offset diagonal so that you can't, like, they wouldn't twist out or anything. They're held in by 2 screws. You know, it would be impossible for you to twist it, for it to unscrew out of the bottom. I do wish I would have made these feet just slightly bigger, like maybe 4 inches, because it is a little tippy, but that's also because I use soft close drawer slides, which I kind of wish I wouldn't have done that either, but I can always change those out. So there they are, there's the feet, and those boards are not level, so I wasn't using that as a guide for level. Now this is for, she wanted to have a little shelf in the cabinet part of it, just so she could put things up on a little shelf if she wanted to, instead of having everything just sitting on the bottom, which is nice. It gives you a little more space too, because you have that vertical storage in a sense. So I was just cutting it to fit snug in the space, so I had to shave off little blade widths as I went and just test fit it. And once I got that fitting, which this also didn't fit this perfectly square, I had to screw in one side and then kind of force it over. So here I was just using a little pocket hole jig, just a little Craig pocket hole jig. I only have the single, so I have to move it and re-drill. But this is really nice for just hiding screws. Those clamps, those little squeeze clamps are just horrible, but it works good enough for holding this thing down. I probably should get the Craig one, but I don't use a pocket hole jig that much, so it's not that important. So I clamped it in there sideways so it was flush with the edge, and I clamped it so that it squeezed it, and then I ran the pocket screws in. This also served as a bit of a rigid side to side brace too. Not that it needed it, but it's just a little bit extra. And I put another one in the front that served as like a drawer stop and a door stop as well, which also again serves as a little bit of a brace. If I ever do get better at this video thing, I'll obviously not do voiceovers, and I'll try to talk while I'm doing the work. But also in this room I have a furnace, and that furnace kicks on all the time, and it's just noisy in there, so this just works out better anyway. Maybe one day if I ever have my dream shop, I'll be able to do that, but for now this is the best option. So now I'm just making the drawer, and I had the shiplap left over from a previous thing I had done back during the start of the pandemic when I had a lot of time on my hands to do stuff at my house. And I kind of wish I would have cut off the little, like, whatever you call them, like notches, so that it, like, grooves together when it helps for keeping spacing. But I would have, I kept the bottom one for a reason, because I don't have a table saw. I don't have any way of cutting in like using a dado blade to like cut in a groove for the drawer bottom. So I wanted to have at least the bottom one, but the top one I kind of wish I would have cut off. But it doesn't really matter. It's just a drawer. It's, you know, whatever. That's just a sheet of, I think it was a 1/4 inch plywood, which fit in the groove perfectly. So that was the whole reason why I wanted the bottom groove. But like I said, this is just scrap shiplap that I had, so I figured it would make, it's like the perfect material for a drawer, so that's what I did. And I used pocket holes again for that. I know like probably not the best for a drawer, but it's not a heavy duty drawer, so like it doesn't need dovetails, it doesn't need any kind of crazy joint for the corner. It's just a drawer and a nightstand holding little knickknacks and stuff like that. So these pocket holes are fine, and it's also a like an MDF or like particle board material anyway, so I wouldn't be able to do any kind of crazy joint with it to begin with. But just glued it, pocket holed it together, and I had to make it twice, or I had to make something twice because I did it wrong. I made it too wide initially. I had the side pieces on the outside, so like my pocket holes were reversed, like the pocket holes were on the long sides instead of the short sides, and it wouldn't have fit the drawer slides. So anyway, I eventually got it working. This was the first time I ever installed drawer slides, and I didn't record it, which I don't know why, but I didn't. I didn't really have any trouble with the drawer slides, though. It actually was pretty easy. I was kind of surprised how easy it went. And they are soft close, which I may get a set of just regular drawer slides for it, because the soft close function works really well in a like kitchen cabinet or something that's attached to a wall, because you have that resistance when you pull on it. With this, because it's just freestanding, when you pull on it, it's not a very heavy thing to begin with, so like you have to hold the nightstand down, or else you'll literally just pull the nightstand straight over, like it'll just topple over, because the feet aren't very big either. So if I just put regular drawer slides in it, it would be fine, but that initial pull of a soft close drawer slide is just, it's hard to get it open without holding it steady with your other hand. So my wife complains about it. She's fine with it, like she doesn't care, but she always like grumbles about it. So I'll probably change it out. It'd be easy enough. I would really just have to get new ones and just put them back on in the same spot and be fine. So I also didn't take a video of cutting the baseboard for the drawer, but still, that I think that was just a piece of 1x7, because it was a 7-inch piece that fit in there. So now here, I used my straight guide, because this drawer was perfectly square, because it was made out of that shiplap material, so that was just a perfectly square material. So I needed this to be perfectly square, so I used my guide and cut this perfectly. And it was so good that it literally fits in the slot, like so perfect that I couldn't get it out once I put it in. I had to use, you'll see it in the video, I used the little metal part on the end of the tape to get it out, because I couldn't get it out. Perfect fit. And like I can't get it out. I'm like, well, now, which I could have just lifted up the drawer and popped it off from the bottom too. I don't know why I didn't do that, but I just hooked it with the tape and pulled it out. So then all I did here was just I glued it, the trusty Gorilla Glue wood glue, which I know is probably not the best wood glue, but it's glue, and it's not a serious project. So I glued it in, and then I drilled a bunch of little tiny pilot holes, just like little ones. And I just hammered in some little finish nails just to give it a little bit of extra bite, because it's not like a normal drawer bottom where it's just slid into a groove and it's kind of built into the side of the drawer. Like this could, if you dropped something in it, technically it could just knock the bottom of the drawer out. I don't think that will happen now because I put those nails in along with the glue, but it's not going to be holding anything that heavy, so I'm not that worried about it. And if it did break, I could just literally make another drawer. Like, not a big deal. I have more of the shiplap. But yeah, this ended up working out really well. I was kind of surprised how well it worked. Like, I was actually, out of everything, I think I was most proud of this drawer. Because the drawer just came out really, really well. You can tell that like this took me quite a few many days because I've worn so many different clothes in all of this. I have hats on sometimes, I don't have hats on other times. But I could only work on this when my youngest son was sleeping. My oldest son is in school, so he's, gone during the day. And I can do it when he's home too, but like my youngest is just not old enough to be able to be on his own. He's only one, so he has to be around, and it's just not possible. So I only had like 2 hours to work on this during the day. And surprisingly, he did not wake up for a lot of it when I was running saws and hammering, and his room is literally almost directly above this space. It's a little bit on the other side of the wall to my right, but still, he's like literally almost right above the space. Now I also did not record video of me putting the door hinges on, which again, I don't know why. I also didn't record making the door, which that was just again two panels glued together. I think I did have to rip them down a little smaller, but anyway, it was just two 1 by whatever glued together again and cut to fit the space. This is for the back panel. This didn't need to be perfectly square, so I just cut it. But anyway, I don't know why I didn't record putting the hinges on. I had a bit of trouble with the hinges because they were like the flush hinges where the door sits flush inside the frame. And for some, I don't know what I was thinking. I don't remember what the measurement was, but I had a certain measurement like on my mind, and it was the wrong measurement, and I had drilled out the holes. I had to use like a forceps bit to drill out a pretty large hole. And I put the hinges on, and then I knew it was wrong as soon as I went to go put it, like as soon as I looked at it, like with the hinges on, I was like, well, that can't be right. So I ended up having to flip it around and use the other side of the door. So now the one side, it's on the inside, but the one side has these big holes in it where the hinges, where I originally drilled out the holes, because I drilled them in the wrong spot. So I had to go back and fix that. So now when you open it, you can see the 2 big holes that I had drilled out for the hinges the first time. Realized my mistake, so It's whatever. My wife doesn't care. I know it's there, but no one else is ever going to know it's there. But I don't know. Those hinges, the space isn't perfectly square, so like it was a lot of adjusting the hinges. I actually had to chisel out this piece that I'm about to put in here, which is what I was using as like the door stop. I had to like chisel out the one side of it, the left side of it, and for the door to like close properly, because I couldn't. It wouldn't sit flush otherwise. It was just it was a big. It took forever to get that door right, but I finally did get it right, and it actually turned out nice. But I didn't record that, and I didn't record putting on like the drawer pull and the knob for the door, which that's not really anything serious. I just noticed when I was putting this together that I didn't have any video of it. So there's that. I did also put a little tiny triangle piece at the bottom to be able to be there for the bottom corner of the door when it's closed. So like if you pushed on the bottom corner, it wouldn't the door won't flex at all because it's hitting that piece of wood. It just makes it so that if you push on it, it doesn't push the door inward. So now this was just painting. This was just white paint. I think it was a semi-gloss. Just white semi-gloss paint. I didn't paint the inside because there was no point, but I did paint the top or everything else in the bottom. The back panel was already on, so I didn't paint the very back edge, but I did do 3 coats, though I only showed the first coat, and I sanded in between the coats. And then the poly, this is the final coat, but I did do 3 of those, and I sanded in between coats of that as well. So, and I only did the top, the sides, and the front for poly, because if she sets a wet cup on there and it sweats, it won't leave a ring. It'll pretty much just wipe off, because that poly acrylic leaves a really hard, solid surface, and it'll just keep things from staining it. So this was the final project, and I'm pretty happy with it. I know it's not perfectly square. The gaps around everything isn't obviously perfect, but it works really well. And you can see when I pull on it, it almost tips it. So I need to fix that. And it does close perfectly. It didn't shut properly there. And then you can see the little shelf and the cabinet door. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and hope it inspires you.